They're going to dictate to every business how they run their ships.
Good afternoon, and welcome to an Oak Harbor City Council workshop meeting. It is 3 p.m. Here Tuesday, October 18th. I'd like to call the meeting to order and note that we have a full seated council this time for the first time in a while, and special welcome back to Councilor Munns there on the end. Welcome back. Our meeting today is departmental briefings, and we're talking about our budget presentation of the general fund. And so it looks like I'm turning this over to Dr. Merriman. Take it away.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. And I'm just doing the mic check real quick. If I'm good there. Okay. As the mayor just mentioned, that today's discussion are on the remaining departments in the general fund. We've already talked about fire and police and parks. So these are the main administrative ones that you typically find in City Hall. This discussion always takes a little different direction than some of our other funds. And as you know, with utilities and some of our construction funds, we're a little bit more control of our destiny than we are the general fund. The general fund has a lot of different things about it, different dynamics and things that make it more challenging when we start talking about budget. And you'll see some of those today. We'll talk about them a little bit, and in a couple meetings in the future, we'll be discussing it again. But this is one slide I've always put up each budget cycle because to me it kind of graphically represents what we deal with the general fund. I have the tortoise and hare analogy there. Just expenses go at their own speed, and we always seem to find ourselves in the position of hoping revenues can keep up with that. And that's mainly in terms of inflation. It's not that we're adding a lot of things to our budget or trying to live outside our means. It's just the way that our environment is, and we're not alone when you look at other cities. The main parts of this dilemma are, as I mentioned, inflation. The costs outpace our revenue growth. I think just some of our tentative numbers, we've seen the revenue growth for the general fund averaging a little over 1% a year when you look at the entire general fund. Inflation, you'll hear on the news, they talk about 2% around there. But what we see in our operations sometimes is a little bit higher just because of the nature of our business that we do. And so it's difficult sometimes for our revenue growth to keep up just with inflation and those things that we have. Other things that come out of the blue sometimes to get us are unfunded mandates. Those can be external and internal. External, we have things come from the state that says, you have to do this now, and we want you to pay for it. Internal, we can make our own choices and decisions where we put things that are good things for our community. We have to try to find a way to fund that mandate. And again, changes in the environment. We had one this last year that's caused us a little bit of grief on the budget. I'm trying to get it done this time. That was the court case with Mount Vernon and Burlington versus the American Civil Liberties Union. We had to put a lot of money, new money now, into public defense in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's one example of something in our environment that happened that is a change in our environment that causes us to have some more stress on our general fund budget. The third bullet point I have is the lingering effects of the Great Recession. We've gotten past where the sales taxes and everything else were dropping. We've come back a little bit, but remember we did lose car dealerships and some things that as an effect, we had a permanent impairment of those revenues. Those aren't coming back because those are no longer here. So we're still dealing with a little bit of that impact as a result of the recession. And finally, I have the haves versus the have-nots. And there's some discussions we'll have on regional spending. A lot of times we call this sales tax leakage. You'll have people leaving Oak Harbor to go over to the malls to spend money. And that's always something we have to monitor and watch closely, not only for budget, but when we're talking about economic development and those types of discussions. One thing I see as a future discussion we'll probably be having in the next year or so is a long-term fiscal sustainability plan. And Patricia and I have been talking about this quite a bit. How do we do something to plan ahead into the future so we don't always have that hand pinching the two lines together? So today, as far as what our discussions will be, Patricia will give us an update on some of the things we're doing to balance the general fund. And then we do have the presentation of departments. And there are 10 of them today, which is a lengthy list. but a lot of these are fairly simple compared to some of the more complicated ones we've done so far. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Patricia.
Hello. Okay, I killed it. There we go. Okay. So the agenda, Doug kind of spoke to it. I'll go through the summary of the general fund budget, and then I'll go through my two that I'm presenting, which is finance and the library budget. Doug will present city council, judicial, mayor, administrative, and general government. And then human resources will be presented by Emma House. Law will be presented by Nikki Esparza, and development services will be presented by Steve Powers. Budget meetings that we've had to date, we had the revenue estimates presented. Those have changed and will probably continue to change as we go through this. The expenditure budgets for the general fund were presented by Fire, Police, and Parks. Public Works presented their utility, shop, equipment repair, and replacement. And today, we're doing the general fund. The upcoming budget meetings, November 1st, we'll be presenting the preliminary budget to council. So you'll have a month to look at it before we bring forward an ordinance. November 15th, it'll be the property tax levy presentations. And that will be a two-part, as the IPD was under 1%. So we'll have a present to council a decision whether or not we want to do the piece that brings it up to 1%. And then December 6th will actually be the ordinance that will be presented on the final budget. For me, and you guys probably already get this, but it's kind of a good reminder, general fund is the catch-all budget for the governmental agencies. It records all assets and liabilities that have not been assigned to special or proprietary funds, and it provides the resources necessary to sustain the day-to-day activities. Current challenges, as Doug alluded to, our property tax limit of 1% doesn't seem to keep up with the 2% inflation. We have some of the mandated expenses. Our state requirement is changing as of 7/1. The PERS 1 through 3 is requiring us to increase our contribution by 1.34%, and LEF 2 is requiring us to increase at 0.02%. City medical benefits, current estimates are about a 6% increase. Some of the things that are out of our control, the Obamacare ACA reporting requires us to offer insurance to some of our paid-on-call, seasonal and temporary, that in the past we wouldn't have had to. It's based on a number of hours that they work in a year. You have to do a look back to make sure you've offered it or you're out of compliance, and then you have to do a reporting on it at the end of the year. PERS, they did a look back, it looks like in 14, and as of, we weren't aware some of our paid-on-call would require being paid the PERS benefit, so that changed our initial 15 and 16 budgets, so they were a little under where they should have been. As Doug also alluded to, the city of Mount Vernon versus ACLU, that comes to a $240,000 commitment in our judicial fund that we're required to do, and it's out of our control. Cuts, we've made some cuts. So since you were presented with some of these budgets, admin has taken a look and made some cuts to them. Fire, we took a look at the paid-on-call salary and fringe and reduced it back to the 2016 amounts. ICOM's rates came in between the presentation and now, and so we adjusted both police and fire for those rates. And then parks, there was a park plan in there that was also removed because it was decided that it potentially could be done in-house. General fund, we had personnel requests in the initial budget that was presented to administration that included an assistant city attorney, code enforcement officer, records information specialist, and a park specialist for an estimated total of $327,353. All of those were cut. There was also a 2018 presentation for a fire lieutenant and 4 firefighters for a sum of $457,500, and then 8 new paid-on-call positions for 132. Those were cut. So they were removed from those budgets in the current summary that we have. Capital outlay request. Originally, we had over $4 million worth of capital outlay requests combined between 17 and 18. We have cut $1,234,341 out, which still leaves $3,379,000. Most of that total is for the Windjammer Park, and you'll see as we go through. The general fund actual contribution to the capital outlay, in 17, we've pared it down to $865,656 at this point, not saying that that won't come down further. 2018, it's at $208,000 coming out of general fund. The rest of the $2,305,000 is coming out of other funds, which is REIT, the municipal pier, impact fees, both transportation and park, paths and trails, and grants. So we're looking for sources of funding that we can utilize versus general fund to try to help. These are the capital outlay requests that are still sitting in the general fund budget. Each department will talk through theirs. Other ones have already talked through their, those. Police already talked about theirs. Parks talked about theirs. There are other projects in the general fund that don't have any general fund contribution. Parks there's some playground equipment that's being fully funded out of the impact fee, so I didn't list those here. I just wanted to be just a real clear picture of what was coming out of general fund. We have existing commitments coming out of the general fund this year, next year planned, and then 18. We've received extra sales tax due to the wastewater treatment plant, and we've committed those funds at this point to going towards the Windjammer Park. In total for the 3 years, we're at about $1,060,000 that will be transferring into the Windjammer Park. And and that's based on estimated construction cost at 0.85%. So those will change, and they won't actually be transferred until the end of the year when we know exactly, we can trace it to what the true tax is, sales tax. And then this is a summary for you, general fund revenue. So we start 2015 compared to current. I just wanted you to see this is where we stand today. That may change if we come across any more information. $14,256,000 and $13,851,000. If you look at some of the percentages, in 2017, the change on property tax between the 16 budget and 17 looks like it's wrong, but what actually came in per county, we did up at 1%. So that is 1% above what we actually received. So comparing it to budget kind of offsets the percentages aren't always exactly correct. The general fund expenditures, just so you could see in summary, most departments didn't present their detail because it's still in flux, so that will be presented when we do the draft budget. But I wanted you as council to see where we stand so far. And I wanted to go through, if you look at the percent change, 2017, and then right next to it's a percent change. I'm going to discuss some of the larger ones, the changes there. So the mayor's budget, there was a under budget of fringe. The city's admin assistant wasn't budgeted, it was just an oversight. So his percent really didn't change that much when you record the actual fringe. In fact, I don't think his did much of a percent at all. He kept everything pretty consistent. The economic development, it went down 81%. We removed that person. So the salaried person is gone and 20,000 is left for whatever the mayor would like to do to help with the economic development. The HR position looks like it increased. That budget looks like it increased 26%. Actually, 50% of one of their full-time HR analyst was split between fire and police, and we just pulled it all back into the HR budget. So the impact to general fund wasn't an impact to general fund, it just impacted that budget and reduced both fire and police by their 25% they were contributing. Finance budget, I was budgeted for part of a year, and so was the new staff accountant. So when you budget me for a full year, it changes it. So it was about $37,000 less than what a full salary for me would be, and my accountant was 25,000. I'll go through some of the other changes, but that's the biggest difference in percent. Animal control went down because we removed the building in 16 for the animal shelter will not be done, and in 17 we didn't include it. So that's what causes that decrease. And then the library looks like a huge decrease, but that's because the HVAC project is in 16's budget, and in 17 I left 15,000 in there, and I'll go through that a little bit more later, and then it's completely gone. So you'll see a decrease of 71, and then it back down to just the pieces that we normally provide. When you take out the capital outlay, add in the capital outlay request, and do a calculation, which will be on the next slide, we're in the red. So revenues for 17 are 14,256, 411. Expenditures are at 13 million. Capital outlay for 17 is at 856 coming out of general fund, which brings our deficit to 594, 878 for 17 and 374, 353, which that's pretty red. Then if you go to the estimated cash available, because the budget is without any of the beginning fund balance part of it, it's just current year revenue versus current year expenses. We have estimated cash right now for beginning 17 of 1,000,004. You take out the 969, which is the combination of 17 and 18, and we would still have estimated cash sitting in our general fund of 465. The stability fund, which is something that was set up for this council to determine if they wanted to use it, has 3,419,000 in it, estimated to have it in it. So that's what you have available. And that was a lot of information in a really quick time. So if you have questions, just let me know.
Yes, Councilor Munn.
Thank you, Mayor. Back on the general fund revenue, a white, gray, yes.
The revenue one?
Right, and you said that these are just predictions because we won't count it till the end of the year when we close out. Doesn't it usually take about 2 months that we kind of lag before we really know what our sales tax are? So it would be more like February, 1st of March, that we would really know what we closed out with?
Right.
Okay.
So when we're closing the year is when we'll do the allocation to the Windjammer Park.
Okay.
Yeah, because
All
we'll
right.
actually look at Hoffman and some of the other large vendors. He's going to be handling most of the subcontracted, their sales tax are going to go through him, and then anything else we'll be able to get that from the wastewater treatment plant staff.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's the only question I have at this time.
Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. The last slide, just before the questions, you've got us in the deficit, but when you include the cash on hand, and then we end up at the 465, 111, so at the end of the day, or the biennium, as it were, we're not actually operating in the red. Like, we're not going to go into zero money. We will still have money on hand to do.
Yeah, that's why I could present it tonight. I wouldn't have been able to present it if we were going into the red.
Okay.
So,
Perfect.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Yes, so on page 11, under general fund expenditures,
Okay?
on economic development for 2016, that's the salary of the economic development.
Mm-hmm.
And for 2017, 2018, what are those 20,000 for?
It's professional services and/or surveys. That's all up to the mayor's discretion. I'm not sure what his plan is, but it gives him the ability to do something towards economic development without keeping a salaried budget in there if the intent isn't to hire.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Almberg.
Thank you, Mayor. On the revenue side, was figure how I can frame this. We have an anomaly going on right now with the major construction project down at the wastewater treatment plant and base construction, which we get some tax spillover from that too. Are those revenues projected into this budget?
Yes. If you look at the sales tax, you'll see that it goes from $3,138,000 up to $3,881,000. That is the projected receipt of excess sales tax. We on page, let me go to the page where it discusses that. Let me go back a couple more, right here. So we anticipate, based on the construction schedule, we've already received, Doug had already committed 252,588 of sales tax and license excess for the Windjammer Park. So that was 16 and 15, right, Doug? Okay. Then in 17, we looked at the construction cost and applied the 0.85 sales tax percent we receive, and that's the number that it came to. And then in 18, because that looked like the cost of the construction was going to go down to about 11 million, then I applied that percent based on the last estimates we received.
Okay, now that leads up to my next question and comments. That is an anomaly. It's not, this is an outlier for our income stream. Some of the budget request items in here, are they one-time requests?
Actually,
Let me finish the question. Are they one-time requests so that our income stream is sustainable without the major construction project income from sales tax, and also is it sustainable without dipping into our stabilization fund?
yes, unless something comes up that we don't anticipate. But
That's what the stabilization fund is for.
Right, that's what, to dip into it for. So in the capital outlay request there at the bottom, that 865 and the 208, that's actually the full amount that we are anticipating receiving from the wastewater treatment plant added to the other capital outlay requests. So you can see it better on this page right here. See how Windjammer Park at the very bottom has 629, 986, and then 177, 633? That's the amount that we anticipate receiving in sales tax that we are then going to transfer over to the Windjammer Park. So since it's a one-time revenue, we're doing the one-time expense so it doesn't impact our ongoing operations.
Okay. So then I'm going to end it with a comment then, because when I look at this budget, for my vote, it's only one obviously of 7, I look at the required funding for essential services, fire, police, utilities, the things that are essential, and then we also have to combine that with a sustainable ability for our community to pay, considering that we have union contracts, et cetera, that go into this thing in order to get to this balanced budget. I looked up a couple of things that probably the public has also checked on it, going to Labor and Statistics online, and you find out that our mean average household income in Oak Harbor is approximately $42,000 to $43,000 a year. And the federal government, considering Social Security for our older members, I hate to say this, I'm one of those too, and it's my understanding that is almost a zero increase for them, 0.03%. So we have to balance the ability of our community to pay along with the meeting the needs required for the management of the city. And as we go through this conversation, I will keep asking that question. Are we staying within the means comparable or comparable to what our community's ability to pay is? So when we start talking about major capital purchases, I would be looking at cutting major capital purchases that are not essential and that are simply not sustainable without the income stream. Thanks.
Yes, Councilor Servades.
Thank you, Mayor. Coming back to the park question, that park slide that shows the 3 totals adding up to just over $1 million, is the 252 that was 2015, 2016, that's escrowed right now into a Windjammer Park fund?
It's escrowed currently in a line in the stability fund, not part of the stability funds, but we moved it out of general fund, so it wouldn't be part of the considered beginning fund balance. But I'm budgeting it to be a transfer into that Windjammer Park, the 325.
Okay.
So it'll be transferred in 16, as well as at the end of 17, whatever sales tax we receive off of the wastewater treatment plant.
So with that, plus what we're projecting, approximately $1 million to work with down there.
Yes.
Okay. And then coming back to Councilmember Heisen, that slide, the second to last slide that she referenced, when we have a beginning cash balance, is that cash that was created in this current budget cycle?
What that is the estimated beginning fund balance. We took out any obligations that were known at the time we set the budget. We took out 3 months of reserve for the 3 months reserve that we have applied to all of our beginning fund balance. And that's what we estimate we will be at the end of at the beginning of fiscal year 17.
Okay. I don't want to, I'm nervous spending all that if it took more than a cycle, if it wasn't excess created in the current cycle.
I think it was higher beginning fund balance was higher at the beginning of 16. So I'm not sure. I don't know that answer.
Okay.
Doug, do you? Okay. Do you want me to look into it?
Please, I'd just like to research the history of that. I mean, if traditionally we have excess in a beginning fund balance, then I'm more apt to apply it towards expenditures. If we don't, that's not sustainable at the moment. The only other comment I would make, I very much appreciate the tortoise and hare lines pictures, and I've referenced that many times. I think it would be an interesting for the public to see, to start putting some dates and numbers to those lines. Let's project out 10 years. You know, when we talk, and you said we'll talk next month about the property tax initiative, it very much concerns me if you were to go out. It's one thing to see some lines, but if we put a 10-year projection based on our current budgets and a 20-year projection, it's very, very concerning. And that's just something I'd like to see, is some projections out there, just so the public can get their head around that as well. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Councilor Campbell.
I just have one question. If we did not do Windjammer Park, could we give the fire and the police the people that they need?
It would sustain unless there was a significant change, maybe 2 to 3 years, and then I don't know how we would continue paying them.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions at this point? Okay, we'll move forward.
Okay, so now I'll present the finance budget. I just want to start with our mission. Finance's mission is to provide the most efficient and effective use of city's financial resources. We want to always provide excellent customer service to the citizens, administration, city council, and all departments. And we want to maintain the public trust through integrity and sound financial practices. I just listed the responsibilities of the finance department. I won't read them to you. And then the proposed budget. So the one thing that I'm asking for in my operating budget is and the full cost is listed there, but the actual impact to each fund is detailed out. It's about $1,624 or $642. But it's for an accounts receivable and purchase order module to be added to Eden. Currently, we don't have a purchase order system in our system. We don't encumber funds in our system until the end of the year when we do accruals. And I'm concerned with that. A purchase order module would do the following. It would encumber funds at the start of any contract in our accounting system. So it would allow invoices to be applied to that commitment, and at any point, staff could look up and see where we stood on those contracts. And so it would allow us to have more of a ability to ensure we didn't overpay contracts or things were not recorded correctly. It reconciles the balances due to what's been paid, like I was just saying, and then it also starts the online workflow process that you can ensure that each step of the purchase process has a setup approval queue that is tracked inside of the accounting system, not tracked on paper. The other system that would be helpful to the city, from what I can tell, we currently have all of our invoices in paper, and we keep them in books in different departments, and some of them are kept up in our utilities department. but we don't actually accrue it into our accounting system again until the end of the year. This would allow you to input invoices into Eden, and then record accounts receivable the moment you input it. So in real time, you would know who owed you what. You wouldn't have to go through and re-add it up or look at a spreadsheet. It would be part of the accounting system. So I would like to see that. I could be told no, but I really think it'd be good for the city. The 5,000 would be for the training to ensure that we set it up appropriately and that staff using it would be trained on it. I increased travel for my new accountant by $1,620. She's going to need to go to some bars training and some of the other training just to get her up to speed. And it's always good to keep your staff informed. The utility remodel that's in our capital outlay, the reason that that's there, I understand it's been there for quite a while as a request, and it doesn't always stay, so it's up to council and the mayor and Doug if it stays. But one of the things that I keep hearing is safety and security for our utility billing staff. They would be looking at putting a bulletproof glass to make sure that they have some more a safer environment. Any questions on the finance budget?
Yes, Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding the purchase order and accounts receivable modules in Eden, and I'm all about efficiency and getting rid of paper invoices and spreadsheets, can you quantify the savings in staff time? Like, have you estimated?
I haven't done the hours, but everybody maintaining their own spreadsheet takes time.
Right.
Somebody reconciling those spreadsheets
Right.
takes time. Ensuring that you actually set the contracts up at the time. This would force them to be, the purchase order to be set up before you could pay it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to pay it without it going through the purchase order system. So it would force a lot of efficiencies that may get missed now. I haven't been here long enough to know that they've been missed, but I've never, I think a purchase order system is a really good solution to ensure efficiencies.
I think so too. I think anytime there's redundance in the process, you know, you're just multiplying the possibility of mistakes and having to redo things. I think that this is a reasonable price for doing so, but if I know it's totally hypothetical, but if we could somehow estimate the savings in staff time and then turn that into dollars, I think it would help us,
Okay.
you know, justify that purpose, or purchase, sorry. So again, totally hypothetical, but if you can come up with some kind of estimate, that would be helpful.
I'll give it my best shot.
Thank you.
Councilor Munns?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I was looking at the capital outlay, and something we have discussed over and over, and especially with the wastewater treatment plant, was we were going to have a line item for our community room to start that decision, that we've made a commitment to it, and I don't see it anywhere unless I've just missed it. I mean, I know we're short funds, but you've got to start it somewhere, just like the safety for the community, the outfall was on for 22 years before we finally did something about it. But if we don't make it a reality and put it out there that we want a line item for a community room for our community, is it somewhere that I'm missing?
I haven't seen it.
Okay,
This is something that it won't be in Patricia's finance budget. This will
Okay.
be in another part of the budget. We still have some discussions to have as far as exactly what we want to do in year 1 and year 2. Those are discussions that are coming that we haven't had quite yet. So as far as what you're seeing today, you won't see that on here. That'll be in a different presentation.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilor Servadius?
Thank you. I just want to follow up on, once again, Councilmember Heisen's comments. I know there was a contract that we went over, I forget, engineering presented one where we went over, so the module may have been very helpful there to have caught that. And I know Councilmember Wassinger very early on caught an invoice for 19, remember how much it was? Yeah, 20,000 that almost got paid twice. And unfortunately, those things can slip through, so I think that might be a sound investment.
Anyone else? Councilor Umber?
Thank you, Mayor. I need to just step back even while we're in the finance part of this thing, and correct me, Dr. Merriman. But I think we have a resolution that was passed by this council that our sustainability fund, stabilization fund, was to be $3 million or 25% of the general fund, whichever is greater. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Then, could you explain how you came up with $3,419,700 on the stabilization fund when I look at that general fund amount and it looks like we're about 145,000 plus short on that item?
Actually, let me get to that slide. I don't have it with me. The transfer out of the stability fund, I don't bring it, was going to be for the 255, the 258, I gotta go. So this 252,588 wasn't part of the calculation. What was calculated is 25%, which is greater than the 3 million, and I can get you that. That is still sitting there. Nothing has been transferred out of the stability fund. The only thing that was there were things that were put in there separate from the calculation. So we have fire fees that were in there that are being used for the lighting project. 61,000 is being transferred out of that for that, and that's not in the stability. It's not part of the stability calculation. And then there was the 252,588, which was just transferred in this year, and it'll be transferred out in 17.
Well, I'm missing the point here. The stabilization fund doesn't get touched without a majority vote of the council.
The line that is the council line for stability hasn't been touched, other than adding money to it. I haven't touched that line.
When I do the math, it's supposed to come up to $3,564,000.
I don't
We'll just
think
have to
so.
look at your
Oh, would you?
calculations,
Okay.
Mr. Olmberg, and see how that works. The amount that we show will fluctuate depending on what we're doing with budget and what amendments are done. There might be just a timing issue between what's in the account at this time and then what we're trying to develop as the budget. We may have changes in the budget going up and down a little bit as we're going through this process, but we haven't quite gone back and fluctuated that reserve balance at the same time.
All right.
And we don't
Thank you.
fluctuate it during the year, we wait till the end of the year. So what's in there is the 15, the calculation on the
Okay.
15%
All right.
revenue. We do the 16% calculation when we do the final
That's
financials.
probably why my number is a little bit off.
Yeah, I'm
then
like,
from yours.
I know I didn't touch those numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? I had one question, and I think you probably touched on it, but that the purchase order module is a one-time purchase cost. Are
Yes.
there annual costs thereafter for that?
And that comes through the interfund transfer,
Okay.
and it would be applied across the city. So it would be applied to the proprietary as well as the general fund.
Okay.
And I can get those numbers if you'd like.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we'll move on.
Okay, library.
Library.
So the library, the purpose of the fund was to account for expenditures related to the city's support of Snow Isle Regional Library System. The entity is separate and apart from the city, and we support it with janitorial, security services, and we share in repairs via the interlocal agreements. The fund itself, as I indicated in the summary, went down in 17, but I made sure to put 15,000 in there in case they don't finish the HVAC repairs and there's some punch item or something that needs to be done in 17, so we won't have to come back to council and increase that budget. So it's just a stopgap. Hopefully it'll all be paid for in 16, but, and that if it isn't all, then we may need to adjust that, but currently that's the 15. Otherwise, nothing has changed. Questions on that?
Yes, Councilor Olmberg.
Thank you again. I wish there was some way that we could modify that lease. Dr. Merriman's looking at me, I know that, because we've had this conversation before. This is a regional library. Regional, not a city library, it's a regional library, and we joint venture with them to some capacity sharing expenses. Why is the city of Oak Harbor footing the bill for a major portion of the regional library. And how can we modify that? There has to be some kind of a sunset to that lease. Now, I'm not against libraries and I'm not against education. I'm very pro on both of those areas. Let's get that clear. I'm going to be having somebody bite my head off because I don't like libraries. That's not the case. We've got a lousy lease for the benefit of the city and also for the benefit of the region, but we're paying the bill. How do we modify that lease?
I think first, it's an unusual lease. I wouldn't say it's a lousy lease.
Lousy was my words.
And again, we've talked about this one a few times. It's a little bit of a history lesson, and I can do it in about 10 seconds or less. Back in the day, the city used to have its own. Thank you. Is that better? Great. The city used to have its own public library. It was located downstairs. At some point in time, Snow Isle Regional Library came in and said, we want to do a library in Oak Harbor. And we did an annexation agreement where the Snow Isle Regional annexed the city of Oak Harbor. As part of that annexation agreement, the city agreed to provide a facility for Snow Isle Regional Library. That is why up at the college, we actually own the building, but they're allowed to use that building for no rental fee. And that's part of that annexation agreement. That had to be in probably back in the early 1990s. So under the lease that we do have, we are required to pay for 43% of the facility costs, like security, maintenance, and janitorial. And that's under that same agreement like that and our lease agreement that goes alongside of that. So that's kind of where we came from. It looks a little bit unusual because of that part where we were providing different things under that annexation agreement in past years. So if we wanted to change anything on that, it's not simply changing the lease. We would have to actually look at that annexation agreement if we can do that, whatever provisions there are to have that looked at. And so it's not a simple process. It's not just renegotiating a lease. It's looking at the whole library provision from both regional and a city perspective as well.
Well, the bottom line is this conversation isn't going to work its way into the budget this time around, it sounds
No.
like.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. I'm surprised you let him off so easy. Do you, just out of curiosity, the term of that lease, not the annexation agreement, but,
Off the top of my head, I don't know when that expires.
so that's one of those things, once again, looking out 10 years, I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Allenberg that it might be time to revisit that and come up with a long-term strategic plan to help them be self-sufficient. Maybe we have some cost sharing, but at 80, whatever it was, 80-some thousand, plus the 200 for the HVAC this year, it's a significant investment. Try and find a win-win situation long-term. Thank you.
Okay, other questions or input? Okay.
Doug gets to come back.
Okay, I think, the next 4 or 5 different departments to go through, and I'll start out with the City Council's budget. Going back to the responsibilities shown in our last budget, I've listed those out for you on what the responsibilities of the City Council are. I won't read through these, but you can see this is a pretty comprehensive list of the different things that you're tasked to do as council members. I'm sure we could add many more to those, but they're the main general ones that you do. As far as the City Council, when we look at it from a budget perspective, staffing, we have 7 elected positions. The professional services, typically for City Council, at one time we used to show videography costs in both council and mayor. We have that in a different place now, but the budget you still have in professional services, we've put some in there for a council retreat for each year. And that's if we want to have a moderator or someone come up and speak at that council retreat for City Council. We've done that in the past. 2 other areas that are the main ones in City Council is we have 2 different categories of travel. The first is in-state, and we have it at $1,200 a year per person. Just coincidentally, the 2015 average was being spent around $649 if you take everybody's and add it up and divide it by 7. Travel out of state, we've always budgeted about $7,000 for the Washington, D.C. trip. Now remember, both categories of travel do not include registrations. This is just actual travel costs and hotel costs. And then in miscellaneous, we have a number of different registrations. This is when council attends the AWC, like city action days or regional meetings. We have our NLC registration fees for the trip back to Washington, D.C., and then there are a few smaller other type expenditures in there. So the city council budget is fairly simple, and I can answer any questions on this one that you might have.
Yes, Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. The in-state travel that's allocated at $1,200 per person and that we spent about half of in 2015, does that extra money roll over into next year's budget? Does it get put in the general fund? Does it just get allocated to another line item like out of state or registration? What happens to that?
At the end of the year, all what we call appropriations expire, so it would just go back into the general fund. There may be a time where, and we did this a couple of years ago, where we looked at in-state training versus out-of-state training and made some decisions there. If we see that we're not spending our in-state training, we might want to talk about that again and see what's the most effective use of that money.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Looking year-to-date, I'm sorry, not year-to-date, 2015 salaries, in 2016, it actually goes down $500. Is that accurate?
Yes, and what you can run into is how council compensation works when there are changes. Say that council decides it's time for a cost of living adjustment for council. You can vote on that wage increase, but during the term that you vote on it, you cannot receive that. So what you end up sometimes is someone might have voted on a wage increase one time, but they don't get it, while someone sitting next to them might. So there's different things like that. So as you have changes on city council, say as Mr. Severns went from city council to the mayor's office, the mix changes.
Okay.
So the new person coming in might be making a little bit more or less than what Mr. Severns was.
Okay.
So you get some funny changes in the city
And when
council
I-
numbers.
Thank you. And when I first glanced at it, I thought it was year-to-date, that first column, which didn't make sense in my mind. And someone asked me that. We don't get COLAs, correct? They asked me that the other day.
Correct.
Right, okay. Looking at 2016 miscellaneous and interfund, can you give me examples of both of those? There's 15,000, 16,000 almost in 2016, either Ms. Soul or Mr. Merriman. Some examples of what is miscellaneous and what is interfund.
Since I'm here, I'll go ahead and run with that one. If that's all right, Patricia. Miscellaneous, those are the registration fees for conferences. So we've had that go up and down depending how much activity council uses on in-state conferences, or how many people in the past have attended the NLC conference in Washington, D.C. So that can fluctuate on that, but that's primarily what's in miscellaneous. Interfund contributions is the accumulation of money we're setting aside for any hardware you have, like if you have your iPads or different things like that. It's that money being set aside. It's also the city council's share of, say, software and network costs that we have. So if we have, like Patricia was talking about, the purchase order system, there's different things like that that get allocated out to different departments that use those. So in our Eden system, there are pieces of that that are allocated to city council. It's just that methodology of sharing those costs between departments.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Wassinger.
What is the proposed 250 for overtime?
This one, what we had in the past years is we had a staff person who used to assist with the videography. And then at one point, when Jim Riney started doing that, he brought in his own assistant. And with Jim retiring, we weren't quite sure, are we going to need some backup or something there? So we put a small provision in there just in case we need some staff assistance in helping with the videography.
Yes. No, go ahead.
This may, I mean, this applies to us as council members, but I think to everyone, you know, it looks like, you know, a large portion besides our salaries is travel of our budget. Do we have any policies regarding our travel and say, you know, how many of us, and I'm fairly new, so this may be there, and I don't know, how many of us are going to go out of state every year? Is there sort of any guidance on a limit or a cap or some sort of way to regulate, and in-state too? And that applies for everyone, I guess, in the city that's doing a lot of traveling.
Sure, you bet. And it's a good question because we've had that come up even just recently. There isn't a written policy for city council on how you allocate dollars within your budget. There's a lot of spoken things that we talk about. We know pretty much. You go to the AWC conference in the summer, we do city action days. You know, we don't have a policy that says that. Where we run into it more often is the Washington, D.C. trip. And it would be a good idea to do a policy that states, here's what we try to do. We try to have 3 people go. Or when we go, how do we reimburse? There might be different ways when one person goes versus one if they're accompanied by a family member. How do we work that all out and make that so, you know, we're only spending city money on the city person attending? So it would be a good idea to put something in a policy that says, here's how we do that, and here's how we reimburse for that.
I agree, thank you.
Councilor Almberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Just kind of a follow-up on your comment about if a family member goes along. I think on this council, it shouldn't be, there shouldn't be an impression that the city pays for any family member to go along. And I think in all cases that I'm aware of, everybody is paid for a family member to go along if they went along and paid for any extension. And I know in my case, even paid not only family members' flights, but my own flight too, because it combined other travel in there. So I just want to make that clear for people who are listening to this. We do not have a mechanism for family members to travel on the city budget.
That's correct, and it's a good point to emphasize. One of the things you run into, and I think those in finance can appreciate this, is that even how you charge things when you travel, there are different ways you need to do that. And everyone at the city is very careful to ensure no costs that are impersonal in nature are even charged to a credit card, even if that person comes in and pays for those out of pocket. So we are very careful about that and very closely watching to make sure that only costs that pertain to city operations and nothing else is actually even hits our books or any method of being paid.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Any other input? I guess before we leave that, I think I feel like there is a question going about especially our out-of-state travel. I think if we would like to lessen, you know, how we do that, this perhaps would be a good time to talk about it. So, I mean, you know, I think if you'll refresh my memory, I think that what we've pretty much done historically is had the mayor and up to 3 council people go to D.C. We've got staff going to D.C. now too, and so it would be an opportunity to discuss that. I don't know how you feel. I'd like your input. Councilor Servati.
Thank you. The 2015 number, I have to assume, is accurate, although to me it seems low. I thought there was a ceiling there that we were bumping for several years, and we increased it to 7. You feel that's accurate? 5,800 or 59? We'll round up.
Yeah, that's actual amounts that were paid for travel. Now, one of the things I've seen sometimes is a council member will go back and say, trying to remember, like, if I can use Ms. Munns as an example, they may have opportunities to fly back there at a reduced cost, just depending on things that they have. I think I've seen council members find chances to reduce those costs because of something they're doing. We've even had some people offer to pay half of their airfare to go back, or different things. So where we have 7,000, that's the case of everybody going and the city pays for everything. If you see a difference, 7,000 between that 5,900, that means somebody was doing something to help reduce that cost. So we've had council members contributing personally rather than the city paying for all of the costs of that trip.
Any other yes, Councilor Holmberg?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I support the travel back to DC because we are a naval community. We spend time at the Pentagon and meeting with our representatives and senator back there. And I think if anybody were to go on these trips, they would find out right away that they are not sightseeing trips. You spend a lot of time moving pretty fast. And if we're out of sight, we're out of mind. And in our status, our capacity, a small community with a naval institution with us, installation, excuse me, we have to be back there in some major form. And often we combine it with the task force, NAS would be task force, and the county, et cetera. I think we're looking for ways to be efficient and still keep our profile high enough that to represent the community's needs.
Anyone else? Councilor Wassinger?
I can't speak to the out-of-state travel because I haven't experienced that, but I can say I find the in-state travel has been very rewarding, very educational for me, and maybe because I'm just so new, so I'm still learning a lot, but I think that that's appropriate to do, especially those AWC conferences and classes. I find very beneficial. Now, for the out-of-state, I agree with Councilmember Omberg, but I think more the question is, you know, if we're going to write a policy, you know, is 3 an appropriate number of council members to go, or should it be 2, or should it be more? Should it be 4? That's where I don't have that experience, so I can't speak to what it should be, but I think it definitely needs to be something very stable, especially for such a large expense. And I think that would go for anybody in any department of our staff traveling. Should definitely be a very clear, and is it something that we can get done here if only 2 or 3 go? Can there be another opportunity closer to be as effective? So that's how I feel about it.
Councilor Munt?
Thank you, Mayor. At times we have, I think council has adjusted when the budget's been poor, and either someone's paid for their own way back or not gone to NLC, just gone to the Pentagon for that. I think it's been advantageous to have at times the finance director when depending on with our wastewater treatment plant, in order to have someone who really, no kidding, knows the numbers, to be able to authenticate what we're presenting to the Pentagon. And then maybe if that's happening, then we don't need 3 council members, we just need 2 or 1. But the mayor should always go. I'm sorry, you're the face of the city, and but it is advantageous, you know, whether it be Kathy Rosen, I mean, who knows the ins and outs of our plant and what we're building, to be able to talk turkey with the turkeys. I mean, you know, sometimes you just have to have that level. So I don't know if we want to have it so defined that we can't be flexible. You know, we don't know what the next project is, but I think we've all been terribly sensitive to not run wild with the citizens' money, but to be sure that we're representing and we're getting the point across and what affects the economics of the city and the workings. And so if I'm not opposed, we should do something, but I think we're reasonable in that, hey, we really don't have the money for 3 this year, 3 council and the mayor, you know, and what are we really trying to present? And so maybe it should be this staff member to go back and the mayor and 1 council maybe, or, you know, but I think we should be flexible to fit the time and the need. So I don't mind a policy, but have it so that it's written so that it's not said until, oh, we're always going to do this. Does that make sense or not? Thank you.
Councilor Isaac.
I agree with all of the above, but if we're going to start discussing policy, I think maybe we should have that conversation another time and get back to the budget, my humble opinion.
Councilor Surveys.
Thank you. I guess the only other major line item up there we didn't touch, benefits, seeing a decrease 2016, 2017, 2018. Walk me through that change.
Couple of different things. One, we changed a lot of our benefit plans. So we had some cost reductions and different things there. Two, again, as different council members change or family situations change, you could have additional family members added or some taken off. That may change what we show as benefits there.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, input? Okay, we'll move along.
Okay, the next department to go over is the judicial department. We call this judicial. Most people know it as our municipal court. The goal of the municipal court is providing fair and equitable prosecution and public defense services. There's a little bit of information about the municipal court. This is an interlocal agreement with Island County where they run our district court for us over there, and we cost share in the facility and the operations there. When we look at the budget, you'll see professional services. There are two different categories in there. One are the costs of judges and some of the allocated staff time that comes from over there. And the second line, we'll go to that in just a second, it's a percentage share of court costs and those things under the public defense rule. And we talked a little bit about public defense and the result of the Mount Vernon versus ACLU court case. We put professional services. You may be thinking it's an attorney. Why are we putting it in the municipal court area? There are some rules as far as conflict of interest. So when we're budgeting, what we do is we don't put that in the legal department's expense because really what you have is prosecution and defense in the same department. And we try to stay away from that. So we budget the professional services public defense in this judicial department. Some of the challenges we have with the judicial side of it over there are the overall inflationary costs of services. The county, just like us, they have raising costs and things that we try to account for through the budget process. I mentioned Mount Vernon, Burlington versus ACLU. Both cities shared in that fund case that went on. Some of the things that come up from that is when we talk about adequate defense. This came out of that court case where it's measured how much defense you're giving to your indigent defendants by the amount of time you spend. So it was a little unusual the last time we went for bids on public defenders that we had to reject those bids and send them back and say, you're not charging us enough. Because there's a standard that we have to meet in providing a certain amount of time and a certain amount of cost for each person in each case that comes through. A little bit different way of looking at things. So in these bullet points here, I've put just pretty much say the very same thing. The last bullet point, city contracts, you'll hear us talk about Matt Montoya. We have a contract with Matt to provide that type of service for us. In cases where Matt's firm has a conflict of interest, maybe with one of the defendants in that, we also have a contract with what we call conflict attorneys. And those attorneys come in and will fill in for Matt when we run into those types of situations. The budget for judicial is as shown. As you can see, the two main costs are those professional services line items there. You can see in 2015, they were almost equal at about $148,000. And as we've gone from 2016 and now into the next 2 years, you can see they've jumped dramatically, really. And that's because of the cost of that indigent defense and the public defense costs. The rest of it are just our share of costs that we get assigned by the county over there. We do have an agreement with the county that spells out how we share those costs and that. I think the last time we looked at that was maybe 1.5 years, 2 years ago. They paid off some debt on their building. We went back to the county and said, okay, we want to see our rental rate come down because now you're not paying that cost. So we were able to renegotiate that. That's probably something we'll be looking at in the next year or two here just to make sure that everything is running as it should. And that's what I have for the municipal court budget.
Okay, questions? Input? Yes, Councilor Servadius?
Just software interfund contributions, how does that apply? Or doesn't here, it'll apply in legal?
That would, anything that's for the legal side would go to the legal department. They're not really using our computer system or any of our
Okay.
Eden's programs, so you don't see it there.
All right, thanks.
Councilor Allenberg?
Thank you, Mayor. Question for you. Explain the profit, no, there's not profit, but explain the fee sharing costs for people who pay a fine at the district court. How does the city share in that fee that is adjudicated?
The fees that are per the city, now there are certain types of fines or penalties that are paid that under state statute, say a piece of it might go through the state patrol or go to the state. There's little percentages and different things there. It's not a real simple answer to your question, but for the most part, those fees or fines that are attributable to something to the district court, they originated with the city, then that money comes to the city. In our revenue budget that Patricia had put up there, you'll see some different line items there, and that's where those fees come into it. Things like traffic citations, a couple other different ones that come in there, they're categorized in that revenue budget.
Okay, so if a Canadian gets a traffic ticket going out south of town, Monkey Hill Road, and it's a state patrol, they have to come to the district court. The city is paying a big portion of that fee, but the state patrol takes that money and sends it back to the state patrol or someplace else. Is that the way that works?
Essentially. There's some twists and nuances to that, but that's a good example of a state patrol, and there might be others in this room that can answer that, more in depth on that type topic like that.
Just looking for another source of revenue, that's all.
I know. And there's things that change. At one time, we were doing adult probation services, and there actually used to be a pretty good revenue source on that, but those services over time kind of declined, and the needs and requirements of that changed. At one time, we actually had, when I first came to work at the city, I counted, I think, 9 people in my department, and they told me one day, you have 10. I'm like, where's the other person? They said, you actually supervise someone over at the court that monitors adult probation services. And so we would be charged for an FTE out of the county. That position has been done away with since that time. We don't do that anymore. But those are just some examples that changes in the legal landscape or the court landscape can affect the budget that we're paying out and the revenues that we receive.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? Okay. On to the next.
The next one is the mayor's budget. And the mayor has the different points of his position and his department on what he is responsible for. Again, I won't read through all of these here, and I think you've seen probably these before in some of these other budget processes we do. What's new with Mayor Severance is the goals that he's put up. These are ones that he has shared in some of his outreach to the community. Working together, as we know, was a primary one with Mayor Severance. He has 3 different bullet points he puts in here that are important to him on building and maintaining relationships, enhancing economic development strategies, and building strategic partnerships. And we've seen a lot of those things going on this last several months. The other primary goal is promoting and preserving sustainable infrastructure. And this is pretty important as we're hearing a lot on the news and even through AWC about how a lot of our infrastructure was built in different past years. A lot of it in Oak Harbor was done in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. We're getting now near the end of those useful lives. So this is getting to be more and more of an emphasis for cities, and that's reflected in these goals. And the 2 bullet points here are to complete the construction of the clean water facility. It's a very big one. And then design a plan for resurfacing streets. We've talked about this one a little bit, about possibly doing an inventory of our streetscapes out there to see which ones are in the worst shape and which ones are not. It's much cheaper as we go along to maintain them than to let them fall apart and have to rebuild the street in its entirety. So I think this goal looks at making a plan, getting it in place, and actually doing that inventory and starting forward on that process. The third bullet point there is create an economic development plan for the greater Oak Harbor area. And then finally, it's focus on affordable citizen rates, which is probably shared with most council members as well when we've talked about the treatment plant or different things that the city's doing. Budget highlights for the mayor. The mayor has 2 positions. It is the mayor's position as an elected official, and then 1 appointed position. This is the assistant to the mayor. Travel and registration are very similar to the city council's budget. It's primarily for travel for NLC in Washington, D.C., different training and things that go on. There's also the opportunity for the mayor there in travel because the mayor goes to a lot of other meetings, say meetings at Island County or over in Skagit County or down in Olympia. It helps cover those costs. There's also the AWC conferences and others that might come up. Registration is in the miscellaneous area rather than travel, and it's the same as we talked about for city council. That's for those training and miscellaneous costs that come with those types of activities. As far as the mayor's staffing, this is just an org chart to show that. Above the red line is what this budget pertains to. Even though the mayor oversees these other functions, when we budget for the mayor's office, it is just for his office and that of his assistant. And this is the mayor's budget, and I can answer any questions on this one you might have.
I think that, I guess before we go to questions, I can tell you that there were 2 things that were left out entirely in 2015, and that was any benefits for my assistant. And you can see where, and that's because, and that's in that budget, or was not in the budget for 2016. That 8899 figure, 8,899 figure, did not include the benefits for my assistant. And then there were no professional services. Actually, I take that back. I guess that for the 2016 budget, we did have a $5,000 amount in there. So with that, Councillor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. On the professional services, 2017 has 6,642. That's kind of a random, well, it's a very specific number. Where did we come up with that?
To actually get into details, I'd have to go back and look and see what was added up to get into there. Some of those that we've done in the past were, like, say, if the mayor wanted to have a special recording session for something that he thinks is important to put out on Channel 10 or that, what we've tried to do is put a provision in there. Okay. You can see that back in 2015, it wasn't charged that way, and then in 16, it was changed to be that way. Okay. So that's something that you see there.
And I think I already know the answer to this question, but the mayor has discretion to spend up to $30,000 without council approval. Does that come out of whatever category he decides to spend that on, or is that a line item in and of itself?
There wouldn't be anything in the mayor's budget that would reach that threshold.
Right.
But if the mayor was approving a contract, say for something at Public Works,
Right.
then it comes out of the line item at Public Works.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? Okay. Moving along.
Moving along, City Administrator's Department. I've listed out the responsibilities that have been assigned to my department. Again, I won't read those, but it pretty much touches the overall interdepartmental projects and programs and getting information to City Council, and then also following through on council requests and policies established by council to make sure that staff is working on those in the most cost-effective and efficient way that we can. Goals follow the same type of thing. I won't read down through all of these. Some of these, as I was going through the different goals, these are general goals. These are not work plan goals at this time, but it's trying to provide innovative and consistent leadership to the organization. And I use the word creative in the second bullet, and that's trying to look at different things in different ways and seeing what would work best for the city. The last couple of bullets talk about fiscal sustainability and strategic investment. This ties into the mayor's goals, say with infrastructure and those types of things. So we're trying to push those down through the organization. And then finally, I was appreciative of Patricia having this in hers, is cultivate and maintain the public's trust. And I think that's most important for us as public stewards of their funds and their resources. Budget highlights in my department, I have a staffing of 3. This has been a little bit of a change. You'll see this in the budget numbers. Right now, my department is myself, the executive assistant, Ms. Nicole, and Anna Thompson, our city clerk. In previous years, the last couple of years, it's only been the city administrator. For 2016, it only had half of the executive assistant. Those are some new changes and things that were done in the last budget. When I came to this department, I brought the city clerk along with me from finance. It made more sense because the city clerk works on the agenda and public records and things like that, more for the administration than for the finance department. In my budget, the main areas are travel and training again. The primary ones that we're trying to do, we're focusing a lot for Anna and Nicole both as backup to each other on public records. They both attend the municipal clerk conference. I have WCIA board meetings, as does Nicole. She participates in some of our risk management functions. For example, she was able to write a grant and actually got her trip paid for to go back to Denver a week or 2 ago to work on some of the risk management functions with WCIA. And then in professional services, a primary thing we have in there is the fee for code publishing for our municipal code, our ordinances and resolutions. And that ties in with Anna and the work that she does. Again, this is the same kind of org chart format as the mayor's department. I have mine just above that red line are the 3 of us. And that's the only section that's included in my budget. And again, this is the detailed budget listing there. I can answer any questions on that.
Questions? Yes, Councilor Servadius.
In general, with regard to salaries, I know there's an anomaly there in 2015. Do we have some kind of a COLA built in? Not just your city administrator salaries, but in general in these assumptions?
I think in general, what we've tried to run through is for non-represented staff, looking at a 2% COLA is factored into those costs right now.
Okay. That's all at the moment. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Wassinger.
It seems like the, maybe you touched on this and I was not paying attention, that you have some jumps for like supplies doubling. It looks like budget 16 to propose 17. Just wondering what supplies and interfund contributions, that may be with the staffing changes, I'm not sure.
It is, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Input? Okay,
Okay, the next one I have, this is general governmental. It's kind of the odd one of the bunch. In general governmental, this is where we charge costs that are not specific to one single department. And I put a box here with some examples of this. We have election costs. This is what the county charges us whenever the city has city council or mayor positions on the ballot. We have different dues like NLC, AWC, the Northwest Clean Air Authority, WCIA insurance premiums are charged here that pertain to the general fund, and the rest of them I've shown there. IDIPIC is one where council has supported IDIPIC to amount about $2,000 a year to run alcohol abatement panels, and that's been a good program that we've always had in the last several years. Community support costs is another one. This is where when we have different events in the city, sometimes we have public works, it might be water staff or sewer staff or someone that is working on that event when it's really a general fund event. So really what we should be doing is the general fund should be paying for that time and effort for doing those events. And we try to budget something in there for that. It's a little bit more of a lengthy budget here, but this is the primary categorical breakdown of the general fund, general governmental budget. Some of the odd things you might see in here, it's pretty straightforward as you go down. You can see the community support costs is a fourth line item down, and what we're trying to do is set aside $20,000 to cover different things there. Advertising, this one has moved around a little bit. What we've tried to do in the past, one time we paid for all advertising here, and then what we've tried to do, you could see in 2016, was to push advertising out to individual departments. It's a good intention, but it's a nightmare on tracking all those costs and everything, so we've put that back into the general governmental department in that area. Insurance, you can see right about in the middle there, that's the general fund's share of the WCIA insurance. Our liability component has gone up somewhat in the last couple of years. We've had a couple of court cases and the efforts with the tribes on the Pioneer Way project that affected our premium some. And then as we go down further, you can see subsidies. This might be called inter-fund transfers out or operating transfers out. This has been the line item we use, like say when for 17 and 18, that is the subsidy that is needed at the senior center to balance their budget. Typically, the general fund has always at least put in 1/3 of their operational costs. So what we do is we charge it as an expense in the general fund, and then it shows as a revenue in the senior center fund. So it's one of those inter-fund transfers like that. In 2016, the subsidies, the senior center did not require $420,000. There were other transfers and things going on as well that the general fund was contributing to. So are there any questions on general governmental?
Councilor Wassinger.
What are election costs?
Election costs, say for example, we come up to a year and we have 3 city council members running for their seats. You have a couple of different things that can happen. If they run unopposed, those are good years from a budget perspective because we're only charged 3 people out of maybe 12 different events that might be on that ballot. It can change where, say, we had one position in particular, 3 people were interested, so we had to do a primary. We now have 2 elections. So our costs can escalate depending on how many people apply to run for an office. But it's the county charges us for that. They have an elections office, and they allocate their costs out based on what's on the ballot.
Okay, got it, thank you. So it's actually like putting it on the ballot, all of their cost for how they run their election, printing, and I'm assuming, is that sort of
Correct.
what I'm getting at? Okay, thank you, got it.
Okay, anyone else? Other questions? I am curious about that 2016 subsidy figure. You know, yes, Patricia.
That's that transfer of $135,000 to support senior center, and then it's the $252 going to be held for the Windjammer Park.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Okay. Moving to human resources.
Good afternoon, Council. So I'm here to present on Human Resources Department. And let's see here. So starting with our mission, the mission of the Human Resources Department is to support the city's goal of premier public service by nurturing an organizational culture with shared beliefs, values, and norms that lead to employee excellence. This culture in turn elicits a diverse and creative work environment which leads to superior performance through teamwork and employee recognition in a safe and productive work environment. So here is a detailed list of our responsibilities. I won't read through all of those, but obviously we have a lot going on. We're very busy. And we have 3 things that we would like to propose for our upcoming budget. The first thing is our staffing. Currently, there is an FTE that is shared between 3 different departments. It's shared between the police department, fire department, and HR. And this is to administer our civil service program. The civil service program is mainly just pieces of our recruitment and our selection process, and so all of those functions really do live in the Human Resources Department. They are done by the Human Resources staff. So it's kind of They definitely support the two departments of police and fire because they are civil service areas, but to have the FTE split between the three is a little bit confusing, and it's hard to kind of clearly determine and say that this many hours are being contributed to each of those departments. So it's a lot easier if we can just roll it into HR and assume all of the responsibility for civil service the way that we administer it across the board for those departments. For the operating budget, we are currently in the process of collecting bids and proposals for the classification and compensation study for non-represented employees or non-represented positions. So these are the positions that are not currently under our collective bargaining agreements. And it's a study to make sure that we are in alignment with the market and to make sure that we do have some equitable and fair compensation plans in place to make sure that we can recruit and retain people. This study has not been done for quite some time, so it is time to do it, and it has not been budgeted, but we're hoping to be able to do that during 2017. And then the last request is our capital request for an HRIS, Human Resources Information System workforce solution. The main request here is for a timekeeping system. Currently, we are doing all of our time tracking on paper. It's a very manual process, and a lot of it is data entry, but we're definitely missing a lot of efficiencies with calculating, and there's a lot of room for error with all of the manual process that we currently have going on. So the focus is for timekeeping, but this would also include other modules and pieces for HR to have a full workforce solution, which would mean performance management, succession planning. It would give employees more access to their information about their salary history, position history, and things like that. So a more hands-on way to communicate with our employees. Any questions?
So before I open it up for questions, I want to introduce to the public, Emma House is the lady's name that just presented that. She is our Human Resource Director. Just came with the city not long ago, and she's been a wonderful addition. So Emma, to the public, it's nice to have you, and to the council.
Thank you.
So, Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Help me understand, you said it's manual on paper, the timekeeping. How does that work?
So right now, all the departments have a timekeeping sheet that each employee is responsible for, and it's tracking their hours for an entire month. And they calculate it on paper, and then they send it to usually their administrative assistants, who then send it on to our payroll office. There's a lot of leeway time in between. There's a lot of changing going on the sheets because it's not, you record it that day and you move on. So there's some concerns with how we're doing the data tracking. And then once it gets to the process of actually going to payroll, we don't really have a good system to calculate all of that data entry to make sure that we are doing things correctly. There's definitely some room for error, and we want to make sure that we're completely efficient and correct in how we're paying people correctly for the hours that they're working.
Okay, thank you. That seems a little antiquated.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay.
And I have not done the return on investment yet based on how much savings there would be, but I will definitely look into that.
Other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Our city attorney,
Good afternoon.
Nikki Esparza.
So, I have the city attorney's office budget presentation this afternoon. So here's an organizational chart. Obviously, we have the city attorney. I have a legal administrative assistant and an assistant city attorney. We also have a paralegal who serves as the administrative assistant for the criminal side of our office. Our mission is to protect the city resources and its citizens and assist the administration and city council in developing creative and lawful responses to challenges. Like I said, we have two divisions. We have a civil division and we have a criminal division. The criminal division is myself. Basically, it's myself and Ms. Kim. The civil division provides legal advice and assistance to the mayor, the city council, city boards, commissions, and 11 city departments. We are responsible for drafting and/or reviewing agenda bills, ordinances, resolutions, contracts, and other legal documents. We also defend lawsuits brought against the city and actively litigate cases filed on behalf of the city in courts and other tribunals. This slide shows civil statistics, and it's actually, while it is completely accurate, it's fairly misleading. Everyone that knows me knows that I have a very open door policy. I do not generate files on every request that comes into my office. I answer questions that come in as they come in and don't necessarily generate new case files or login RFAs. But as you can see, our new case files pretty much remain consistent. The dip in 2012 and 2013 was due to having most of our civil legal work done outside of the city through Grant Weed's office. Some additional statistics from 2016. We've reviewed or created 23 ordinances, 130 contracts or agreements, 19 resolutions, 45 other miscellaneous items that got logged in. The criminal division prosecutes misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors, and infractions, which are violations of city ordinances. We seek fair and equitable and just punishment for the crimes that are committed, and we hold offenders accountable for their offenses, improving livability in the city by reducing crime and disorder. Fair and just punishments maintain the credibility of the criminal justice system with both the public at large, victims of crimes, and the offenders. Criminal statistics 2011 through 2016, we've seen a fairly sharp decrease in the number of criminal cases that have been cited since 2011. This year, we are at approximately 303 new cases and 106 reopened cases. Reopened cases just means they were on bench warrant status or something, and or they violated the terms and conditions of their probation, and their case file had to be reopened. Some highlights over the last year: we moved our office downstairs, which allowed us to consolidate all of our files into one location instead of 3 locations, which has certainly increased the efficiency in our office. That has been an incredibly positive move for our office. We've also seen a significant increase in the work on the public records side of things, and also we've seen an increase in code enforcement related issues. So that's one of the challenges that we're facing right now. Our office budget, since the city attorney's office acts as attorneys for Oak Harbor City government, most of our expenses for the office are personnel costs, training, and officer operating supplies. One of the things that didn't get included necessarily in our last budget cycle is our STOP grant. We get $7,500 in grant funds that we receive through it's actually a pass-through grant, I think, for the Violence Against Women Act, I believe. So we get $7,500 a year to go towards, we put it towards travel and miscellaneous. We can use it to fly domestic violence victims back for trials, or we can use it to train our staff to send them to domestic violence related training. This past budget cycle, we've had an unexpected issue with our criminal and civil database when the city upgraded to the SQL 12. Our current pro law program was not compatible with that, and so we had an unexpected expenditure of about $5,500 to upgrade our system so that it's compatible with the new SQL that the city is using. There have also been a couple of other line item increases that are actually just increases to bring the line items into line with what the costs actually were that were incurred. The one change that we're looking for staffing-wise is a reclassification for my administrative assistant. Over the last many years, that position has been morphing into more of an office manager position. My legal administrative assistant is a confidential executive assistant to myself, and she also manages the administrative office functions. She's taking on more of a role in the area of public records and will also be backup public records officer when the need arises. So I am looking to reclass that particular position to what we are calling a senior legal administrative assistant. And been working with HR to accomplish that for the last few months. Any questions?
Okay, questions? Mr. Allenberg?
Thank you, Mayor. Mrs. Sparza, on the criminal statistics for 2011-2016, the case load continued to go down. 2011 it was 622,000, and in 2016, which we haven't completed yet, let's go to 15, that's 443. What is the reason for such a substantial drop in criminal cases that you're handling?
So I can't answer that entirely because we are a direct site jurisdiction, meaning our police officers direct site into court. We aren't a jurisdiction that refers to the prosecutor's office and then I file by complaint. So the reality is I can't answer that as well as the police department most likely. And I'm certain that Chief Drusker can't answer that off the cuff either. I think that certainly for a couple of these years, the police department has not had full squads, and so it's possible that there's been an issue with staffing there. But
I don't know if you want me to answer or if I can give input, but
Well, I don't want to just have a conversation. If somebody can answer the question, I would be happy to have an answer, but not to
right.
delay here the review. And then when I look at the civil statistics, it took a nosedive in a number of cases. As you explained, we outsourced quite a bit of that. So then I look at the budget, and the budget for 2015 to the actual 2016 takes a jump of roughly $150,000, and then it flattens out in that range of 450 to 460,000 a year. What's the reason for the low 2015 budget? And I'm not going to say low, but the 305,000, then it jumps to 450 in 1 year. That would be on page 20 of our handout.
Of your PowerPoint?
Yeah.
No, that was,
Well, I'm looking at judicial. That's
Yeah.
Okay, that's a different
okay.
department.
Yeah, I'm crossing those over a little bit. Excuse me. So then, where is? Help me out then for the legal budget. I'm looking for comparisons in your department.
Okay, that's on page 11. And it's just a summary. We didn't, everybody but one person provided just the summary. We didn't go into detail. That's what I would like to provide on the 26th.
Okay.
So she didn't provide that because that was,
I was just looking for comparison, like we look at each of the departments to see what was going on. So we'll just wait for the next review.
we're still making cuts. So what comes to you on the 26th will potentially look different than what
Okay.
was detailed out today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
okay. And I think the same would go for HR, right? We'll have actually the numbers, expense to look at on that day. Okay. Yes, Councilor Wassinger.
What is an RFA?
I am so sorry. I should have told you what that means. That's a request for assistance. So when I open files, I'm usually opening files on something that I know is going to take me a bit of time to work on. A request for assistance, I will log a request for assistance if I think it's something that I need to, have a paper trail on, but it's just a really simple request that maybe generates a, 2-paragraph response from me. And then I log that in an RFA notebook. So it's a request for assistance.
Okay. Any other? Yes, Councilor Campbell.
Is that request for assistance something you're asking someone else or they're asking you?
It's something that they're asking me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Input? Okay. Thank you. And we are down to Development Services Department, and you have 21 minutes, Mr. Powers. Don't feel pressured here, but I have sat through a few of your presentations.
I could
No,
do that
no, I'm
presentation in 20 minutes. No, just,
I'm kidding.
well, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I guess I'm batting cleanup today. My format is very similar to some of the others that you've seen here recently. I will say in advance, absent any real number detail, that'll come forward at the next go-around. Pretty similar format in terms of some of the most recent presentations. I'll touch on some of the key parts of what Development Services Department does, what we think our challenges are as we go into this budget cycle, some of our goals, and what our budget is based on. And then something really unusual for us, we actually have a capital outlay request this cycle, and for us that's actually fairly exciting. Draw your own conclusions about that. Our mission is to assist the community in articulating its vision for Oak Harbor. What does that really mean? We help the citizens figure out how our community should look, how it should work. And so we do that through the comprehensive planning process, through development regulations and design standards. And the second main part of that is that we administer what we think is a conscientious and comprehensive development review process that makes those visions and those dreams reality. Organizational chart. Apologize for the size. Looking at the screen behind Dr. Merriman, really I'm only going to be focusing on this section of the chart today. This is the marina side and this is the senior services side. Those will be coming forward to you at your October 26th workshop, but they are part of my management responsibility, which is why they show up here in this particular one. But the part that we're talking about today are the planning division, the administration division, and the building division. So key responsibilities, as you might imagine, we help the community with the Growth Management Act. We guide the appearance of our community. We're obviously focused on health, safety, and welfare through a wide variety of means. We try to make sure that we have a comprehensive yet timely development review process. One of the things that maybe doesn't get mentioned all that often is that we staff a variety of committees. Yes, it makes sense. We Planning Commission, you'll probably line that up pretty easily, but we also help staff the Park Board, we staff the Arts Commission, we staff the Marina Advisory Committee, and then we staff a variety of ad hoc committees as they may come to be about. Challenges, boiled it down to 4 challenges for you for this particular budget cycle. The first one is not a new one. I've had this on the screen probably for the last several budget cycles. It's really trying to figure out how we're going to meet our long-range planning obligations as well as our current planning obligations with dwindling resources. So think comprehensive plan update that we got done in June of this year, which took 3+ years to do. Balancing that against the need of somebody who has information and questions about their property today. Those are the 2 extremes that we're working with. Second main challenge, again, also probably not a surprise for most of our council members, is that we need to try to help the city respond to an ever-increasing number of complex state and federal regulations. So whether it's the Shoreline Management Act, whether it's low-impact development, which you'll spend some time with us tomorrow afternoon talking about again, whether it's about FEMA and their role with the Endangered Species Act, it's not getting any simpler, and so we often function as the clearinghouse for the city to try to figure out how we're going to live by those regulations. Third main bullet point I thought was important enough to pull out by itself, which is the Phase 2 permit. I know you know a lot about that, but in this context, why it's relevant is that it's our responsibility to implement that plan review process that is going to make sure that our development community is following the low impact development techniques. Now, we don't do that by ourselves, of course. We do it in tandem with Public Works and then also with Fire Department, but we're the one who is responsible for making sure those permits are being processed. And finally, the last challenge, which I think covers an awful lot of ground, is to meet customer needs in a complicated environment. And you only need to look at the top 3 bullet points to see why I've put this 4th one on there. So our goals, I won't spend a lot of time on these. They follow right out of the mission statement. It's the Growth Management Act. We still have continuing work with Island County in particular on the countywide planning policies. Yes, we just got that done, but it's a document which will continue to evolve over the next several years. So we've already started working with them just here recently on what we expect to be working on in 2017. As you probably know, we helped the city implement our capital improvement plan. Not only do we help put it together, but we're on the implementation side as well. The big key here will be trying to focus on the Windjammer Park integration plan, plus all of the other regular capital projects. I've talked a little bit about timely permit processing. Our objective there simply is just to meet the mandated timelines, whether it's from the state law or whether it's embodied in our code. Our focus is on meeting those timelines. The last two bullet points really get to the topic, or last two goals rather, really get to the topic of public health, safety, and welfare from a couple of different perspectives. One is just in our plan review and inspection process. We want to make sure that new things being built in our community or things which are being remodeled are done in a safe fashion. I mean, that's obviously very, very important. The other part of this here is really focusing on what seems to be an increasing need for code enforcement. And so we made sure that we have a goal in there for this year to keep our eye on that particular topic, or the next 2 years rather. We want to use public education to help folks understand what their options are and also maybe what their obligations are. And then potentially look at some other technological reasons as to how we can track those things better and maybe be a little more timely in our response. So, what is the basis for the numbers when we get around to talking numbers about you? We have 9 FTEs, only of which 8 are filled. The vacant one is our building inspector position that we've left unfilled for a little while. We like to keep that on the books so that when it becomes necessary, it's a matter of funding and not a matter of creating the position. But again, the budget is really based then on 8 individuals who reside downstairs. As you've heard me say here before, we're a people department. Our job is to help others get things done. We have some minor increases in our operations and maintenance funding. And then professional services has come up a number of times this afternoon. Our professional services line item really only includes the funding which is necessary for our contract with the hearing examiner. And you might recall that amount increased just a little bit last year. And then we have an additional $5,000 in there for some minor assistance if we might need very focused help on a particular problem. What that really means is that for major planning projects, we'll have to tackle those in-house. And the example I have on the screen you also heard about earlier today, which is the park plan. So we'll work with public works staff to try to figure out how to do that in-house, since we are unable to fund that through the general fund budget, as you heard earlier. And finally, the really exciting part, I guess, in terms of capital requests for us, is that we are looking to try to add another conference room into City Hall. We would try to create that in the downstairs area. We believe that we can reconfigure area around the building division, where we presently have the plans examiner space and the building inspector space, create a conference room down there. City Hall has a shortage of space. While it's great having new neighbors, they took up the space that we were using as our third conference hall, or conference room rather, in City Hall. And so we've gone through a fairly careful process to estimate the cost. We think we're in the range of $22,870, and that includes furnishings as well. This then would provide a third option for meeting space for all of the city in our downstairs. And with that, I'd be happy to help you with any questions.
Okay, Councilor Wassinger.
So that third conference space, you said would be able to be used by all the departments downstairs?
Anybody in City Hall or even
Yeah.
within the city structure, just like we share the mayor's conference room and this room. Yeah.
Okay.
Councilor Servadius.
I think I have a comment on this and then kind of an overarching comment if I could before we leave, but I'll let anyone else comment on development services. The code enforcement officer, there's no numbers here yet.
Well,
Is that you, or when you say code enforcement, is there?
We presently have a code enforcement function. It resides as one of the duties of the building official. And then our plans examiner takes the brunt of the actual inspections related to code enforcement. We did start to put a code enforcement officer into the budget. That was part of the request. That was part of the positions which were cut earlier that you heard from
Okay.
Patricia.
Want to clarify that. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Olmberg.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, Mayor, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Merriman, and all the department heads and the employees for working on this budget. This is really boring, it's dry, it's difficult to keep people's attention into it, but it's actually the bloodline, it's the cash flow line, it's the sustainability of the operation of this community. And I really appreciate it. And for the council, everybody seems to stay pretty tight and up close on all the numbers in here too. We'll keep doing it, yet we still look for a little more blood on some of these papers, some of the budget items. Thanks.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Economic Development Coordinator, the city created Economic Development Coordinator and seem to have lost that position because for the next 2 years, 2017, 2018, there's no salary allocated there. Before the city created that position, it was the function under the Development Services where a staff member performed only 50% of his time. So we created a full-time position. When we lost this position, who will take over the function? Will that go back to Development Services? Or who will do the planning strategies for economic development?
I think I can answer that question. I've taken on that responsibility myself. I'm developing a plan, and I've got a small group of people that have said that they will sit down and help me develop a plan that we'll be bringing to City Council. So I've announced to the public that I'm taking on the responsibility as mayor, and I intend to spend a lot of my next few months remaining in this year, and a big focus in 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to hear that and looking forward for that economic development.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, other questions? Yes, Councilor Servadius.
Just, this may not be a popular comment, but it's something that's been weighing on me. And this isn't, I asked a question during your department, Dr. Merriman. A large percentage of any organization's costs are personnel costs. And when we weigh in on this property tax initiative coming up in November, where we're limited to it's the IPD, is that the term, or 1%, I'm really worried long term. I don't want to be sitting in this chair in 15 years trying to balance this budget. And I wonder, when we talk about a COLA, we also talk about policies, if it would make sense to have something that's in line with an IPD or a true inflation factor. So what does 1% look like? And once again, I know this may not be a popular topic, especially with non-represented employees. My assumption is we're trying to be commensurate with the represented folks when we talk about 2%, but in general across the board, if we talked about something that was in line with inflation, 1%, do some of these ancillary programs that we're trying to fund, software upgrades which create efficiencies, et cetera, could we pay for those while still giving employees a cost of living allowance that's tied to a policy and or a statistic rather than just 2%?
That is a possibility to do. In fact, previously, years ago, we used to tie COLAs to a CPI index. And I believe it used to be 90% of the CPIW, and there was a 2 and a 4% band. When the recession came along, that was changed because everything was off the table then, just because we were losing so much in revenues. That can always be something we go back and revisit and see if we want to mark it to an index rather than it just being a kind of a subjective shot at where we want to place that at. One of the things, it's not so much a COLA to compare them to the represented staff as it is on a case-by-case basis. Where does that position fit in comparables to other cities? And what we want to be doing is making sure we're at least at the median or the average of what our comparable cities pay. One thing it does when we have someone leave, say they retire or a family moves, we want to be able to attract people. And so when you look at cities of our comparable size, we want to make sure we're keeping in step with them. So that's probably more the theory behind how we mark that rather than just keeping it straight across the city. That's always a consideration there, but it's more about, equal pay for equal work between cities of similar size.
And I appreciate that, and staff know that I want to retain and attract the best employees we can pay for. But spending all of my working career dealing with compound interest, if we have a bunch of cities that are comparing each other at 2%, and all those cities are limited to collecting 1%, it's definitely a tortoise and a hare type of scenario. So I know, Mayor, you and staff are working on this more behind the scenes, but that was just my 2 cents on that topic. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone else got anything? Before we adjourn, could we go back to the page number 12? Is that possible? Actually, I think if you've got in the handout, we'll start with page number 11, and you'll see the red figure for 2017 of $594,000. And then the red figure still on page 11 for 2018 of $374,000. When our finance director talked about those numbers, and then the following page 12, don't feel that we're going to spend all that money. Obviously, we're still working on this, and you'll see more the next time that we bring you numbers that we're still working to cut those deficits down without spending our beginning fund balances. I just want to make that clear. I think you probably know that. It probably goes without saying, but I just thought I'd tell you we're still working hard on this, and the department and the staff is too. They know that it's got a balance, so it will. Anyone else got anything? Okay. I think we're adjourned. We'll see you in about an hour.